Chapter 1. Learning the Piece. Don't be in a hurry to put away the score before you are really, truly ready to memorize. Playing very well with the music is the best foundation for playing well from memory. As you practice, think about which sections you expect will be easier to memorize, and which sections will be difficult. You or your teacher have probably developed a method of practice by which you solidify notes and rhythms. But there are other practice habits that are especially appropriate for music that you intend to memorize at some point. Try the methods described in this chapter, but don't hesitate to make up your own methods as well. Think outside of the box. The more unique ways you can think of to practice your piece, the more you are challenging yourself, making your command of the music stronger. After you have learned your piece and can play it quite effortlessly with the score, you are ready to start memorizing. But you first have to reach that point. Work in small sections. An entire page of music is too much for your brain to take in at once. Pick a short section, no more than 4 to 8 measures, and work on just that until you see measurable progress. You don't have to work on the whole piece every time you practice. The most productive practice sessions usually involve a run-through or two, to keep the piece under your fingers and to make you aware of the sections that are the weakest, and then a good amount of practice focused on just a few short sections. Understand your piece on an intellectual level. Study the score and look for patterns. Don't be afraid to mark up the sheet music. Photocopy the score if you want to preserve a clean version. As you study the score, group the music into phrases or complete musical ideas. Be sure that your phrases make musical sense, and that the end of the phrase comes at a place that sounds and feels right for the piece. Memorizing a series of phrases is much easier than memorizing note by note. It's just like memorizing a speech. It is easier when you think in complete sentences rather than trying to memorize individual letters. Number the phrases in your score. This will be useful for practicing with the score, and more useful still once you start to focus on memorization. Know what material is repeated and where. When you identify repeated material, you are also identifying areas where previous memory can assist new memory. As a visual aid, you might even want to highlight repeated sections in the same color. If material is not repeated exactly, but is slightly altered, take note of what the similarities and differences are. Practice the scales and arpeggios for the key of the piece. Scale passages and chordal passages appear all the time in music, more often than you have probably realized. You will be shocked at how much of an impact mastering the scale and arpeggio of the same key can have on your piece. As you practice scales and arpeggios, watch for passages in your piece that use them. Also notice if the piece has any scale or arpeggio passages in different keys. If it does, practice those scales and arpeggios as well. Practice everything with a metronome. Use a metronome, starting with a beat slow enough that you can play the phrase perfectly almost every time. At each metronome mark, repeat a short section until it's easy to play at that tempo. This should be done at least 5 to 10 times. When you can play the phrase perfectly most of the time, increase the metronome's speed by 1 or 2 ticks and repeat the process. Play the same way every time. Be very particular about fingerings, bowings, breaths, articulations, and any other details of performance that need to be planned ahead of time. If you sometimes play the same passage in different ways, your brain doesn't know which way to do it, and gets confused when you try to reconstruct the passage from memory. Decide on fingering, bowing, and breaths in the very beginning, before you do a lot of work on the piece. Be as logical as possible in these decisions. Try to come up with a technique that makes the passage easy to play, and that also gets musical results. Material that is repeated exactly or slightly altered later in the piece should be fingered, bowed, or phrased the same way. If you have a private teacher, or if you know any more experienced musicians, they can offer you a lot of help in this area. After you make decisions about these performance details, pencil them in your score so you can be sure you are being consistent. Most importantly, stick to the decisions religiously. During practice, an incorrect fingering, bowing, or breath is just as bad as a wrong note or rhythm. You have to go back right then and fix it.